Okay, let's unpack this. We're talking about the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it, arguably the most fundamental, well, world-changing invention in human history.
Absolutely. Foundational.
Everything from transportation to industry,
Yeah.
it all relies on the wheel. Its impact is truly immeasurable.
It really is. It's hard to imagine the world without it.
Right.
It enabled movement, progress on a scale that was just, impossible before.
Right. And yet for something so absolutely critical, something we all just take for granted, its origins are surprisingly murky.
Yeah, they really are.
We don't have a clear record of, like, a specific inventor or even a definitive place and time where it first popped up. It's this massive blind spot in technological history.
It really is. You'd expect something this important to have a clearer historical footprint, But the archaeological evidence gives us pieces of the puzzle, sort of scattered across time and geography. It makes it difficult to pinpoint that initial spark.
So that brings us to the source material for this deep dive. We've got some fascinating research here that tackles this age-old mystery using a really modern approach. Computational science, physics simulations,
Right.
to try and understand the ancient engineering behind the wheel's birth.
It's a great example, isn't it? How these 21st century tools can shed light on technologies that are thousands of years old.
Exactly. So our mission today is to explore this research, specifically a compelling theory about the wheel's rather unexpected origin,
Mm-hmm.
and trace the surprising journey from what we think were simple rollers to the complex wheel systems we use today, all guided by, well, physics and archaeology. Let's dive into it.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So this mystery, it's been around for a long time. We know wheeled vehicles appear in the archaeological record across the Old World, roughly around the late Stone Age, early Bronze Age.
Right. That sort of time frame.
And the traditional, long-held assumption has been that the wheel simply evolved from using wooden rollers. Like those classic depictions. Ancient civilizations moving huge stones by placing logs underneath.
That's the intuitive idea, isn't it? It just seems logical. You've got a heavy object, you put some cylinders under it, and it rolls forward. It reduces the effort compared to just dragging it. Makes perfect sense on the surface.
Which sounds efficient, but the sources point out some pretty significant practical drawbacks to using those traditional loose rollers.
Right.
Things that make you wonder if they were really the direct path to the wheel.
They do, yeah. For one, you need a fairly flat, firm surface for them to work well.
Right.
Any kind of incline becomes very difficult, and forget about trying to turn sharply.
Right.
The biggest operational issue, though, is the sheer constant labor required.
Yeah.
As your cargo moves forward and rolls off the back of a roller, you have to physically pick that roller up, carry it all the way around to the front, and place it down again, over and over and over.
Wow. That sounds incredibly inefficient and labor-intensive, especially for any significant distance. Imagine moving large loads that way.
Exactly. And because of these difficulties, the archaeological evidence suggests that while rollers were used occasionally, maybe for specific big tasks like moving monumental stones, they weren't a widespread method for general transport in the ancient world. It just wasn't practical enough.
So people started doubting this connection.
Yeah, this is why, starting decades ago, back in the 60s even, some researchers became skeptical. They thought, hang on, could this really be the technological predecessor to something as revolutionary as the wheel if it's this impractical?
Okay, so if simple rollers weren't really a convincing starting point, where could the idea have come from? This is where the new hypothesis our sources explore gets really interesting.
Yeah, this is the core of it.
It suggests the wheel wasn't born out on some open plain or construction site, but in a very specific, confined environment inside copper mines.
Copper mines, yeah. In the Carpathian Mountains, in what's now Hungary, this theory dates from around 2015, and it places the origin around 3900 BCE, so about 6,000 years ago.
And the reason the mine environment is so significant here is key, right?
Absolutely critical. Mines, with their narrow artificial passages, actually provided conditions that were far more favorable for using rollers than the outside world usually was.
That's counterintuitive. You'd think an open area would be better. How did the mine help?
Well, because the passages were dug by humans, they could be intentionally made relatively straight and level.
Okay.
This immediately minimizes those big problems we just talked about, inclines and sharp turns. It reduces the contextual disadvantages of rollers.
I see.
And that, the researchers argue, is what compelled someone or some group to start thinking about optimizing roller use in this specific setting.
Ah, so the environment created a kind of problem-solving incentive where simple rollers were just viable enough to start tinkering with. And there's some archaeological evidence in that region that supports this timeline and location, isn't there?
Oh, significant evidence, yes. In the Carpathian Basin, archaeologists have unearthed over 150 miniaturized four-wheeled models made of clay.
Little clay carts. Seriously.
Exactly. And dating places these models from the Bulliet culture no later than 3600 BC. These are considered the earliest known depictions of wheeled transport.
So not the wheels themselves, but pictures of them.
Well, models, 3D models, they predate the physical wheels we found, but they show the idea was there.
Okay, what links them specifically to mining?
Several features. Some of them have this wickerwork pattern molded into the clay sides, and that pattern is remarkably similar to the basketry used by miners of that period for hauling ore.
Interesting.
Crucially, they show a system where the four wheels appear fixed to the axle, turning together as a single unit. That's what's known as a wheel set.
Okay, wheel set. Got it.
They also lack any features for animal harnessing, like yokes or anything, which makes perfect sense in tight mine passages where draft animals probably wouldn't fit. People would be pushing or pulling them.
Right.
The sources even speculate some of these little clay models might have been like ceremonial drinking vessels.
No way.
Yeah, celebrating this new invention by drinking out of miniature mine carts.
That's a fantastic detail.
Yeah.
Celebrating innovation with a custom mug. I love it. What about actual full-sized wheels from that era? Have we found those?
We have. The oldest physical transport wheel found to date is the Ijoljana Marshes wheel. It's from Slovenia, also in the general Carpathian region.
Okay.
It dates to around 5100, 350 years ago, making it maybe slightly younger than the earliest Bulliet models, but still incredibly old.
And how is it made?
Importantly, it is also a wheel set. It has a square hole for the axle, which clearly indicates it was fixed and turned with the axle. This really strengthens the case for the wheel set being the initial functional form of the wheel.
Okay. And we should quickly note, wheeled figurines have been found independently in other places like Mesoamerica, but much later.
Right, much later. Shows the idea of wheeled locomotion could arise elsewhere.
But these Carpathian finds represent the earliest evidence of wheel transport and are the likely source for the diffusion of wheel technology across Europe and Asia.
Exactly. The evidence strongly points to this region and this time frame for the birth of wheel transport as we know it in the Old World.
Okay, so starting from maybe simple rollers that work just well enough in a mine.
Yeah.
How do you get from there to the complex wheel we see today? The sources suggest this was a process, right? Evolutionary steps, not a single invention.
That's the key insight from this research, yeah. It wasn't just one leap. The first major step they propose is the development of what they call socketed rollers.
Socketed rollers. Okay, tell me about that.
So instead of just putting loose logs on the ground under the cart's base was modified. They would carve out these semicircular sockets on the underside of the cart. The rollers would then sit securely in these sockets.
So the rollers are now kind of attached to the cart, held in place.
Yes, they're held in place. And this is a huge advantage in a mine setting. As the cart moves, the rollers are carried along with it. You no longer have that problem of having to run around to the back and reposition them at the front. That solves the primary labor-intensive drawback of traditional free rollers.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense for efficiency. But now the roller's rolling against the ground and potentially sliding inside those sockets, right? Doesn't that introduce a new kind of friction?
It does. Good point. It introduced sliding friction at the roller socket interface, which is definitely a trade-off compared to pure rolling friction on the ground. However, you now have control over the surfaces in contact. You can smooth the wood of the sockets and the rollers themselves. And crucially, this opens up the possibility of lubrication.
Lubrication, right. Grease or fat or something.
Yeah, exactly. And the sources discuss how grooves on the roller surface, whether they were just accidental wear patterns or maybe deliberate additions, could have been critical here.
How so?
These grooves could act as channels to hold on to lubricant like grease or animal fat, which you couldn't really do with smooth rollers. They just push any lubricant out of the way immediately.
I see. So socketed rollers solved the retrieval problem and allowed for lubrication, addressing some major issues. What's the next proposed evolutionary step?
That leads to the second big innovation, the birth of the wheel set. This is where the shape of the roller itself changes fundamentally.
Okay.
The middle section was narrowed considerably, leaving larger discs on the ends and a thinner central bar connecting them.
How might that thinning have happened? Was it deliberate shaping or just wear and tear?
Well, it could have started from wear within those sockets, the middle part rubbing more. Or perhaps it was a deliberate modification, maybe to gain clearance over small bumps or debris in the path. But regardless of exactly how it started, this specific shape change unlocked a massive benefit because of a fundamental principle of physics: mechanical advantage.
Ah, mechanical advantage again.
Yeah.
Always comes back to physics. Can you give us that simple explanation?
Sure. Think of it like using a lever or maybe a winch. When you're pushing or pulling the cart, you're applying force at the edge of the wheel, effectively, at the diameter of that large disc.
Right, on the outside.
Yeah. This force is transmitted through the smaller diameter axle, where it makes contact with the socket or maybe some simple bearing surface. Because you're applying force with a larger radius, the wheel, to move something connected to a smaller radius, the axle, you amplify your force.
How much amplification are we talking?
Well, for example, if the axle diameter is, say, 1/10 the diameter of the wheel, you need roughly 1/10 the pushing force compared to moving a solid, thick roller of the original diameter.
Wow, 1/10 the force. That's a monumental gain in efficiency. That really explains why thinning the middle was such a crucial step.
It's a huge driver, a massive physical incentive. This gain in mechanical advantage provides a really strong reason for the evolution towards this specific shape. And the result is that rudimentary structure we mentioned earlier.
The wheel set.
Right. A slender bar with large discs on the ends, all carved from a single piece of wood, turning together. That's the wheel set.
Okay, so massive efficiency gain, huge advantage, but the sources highlight a key drawback of this wheel set system too.
They do. Turning. It's the big one.
Okay.
Because the wheels are rigidly fixed to the axle, they cannot rotate independently. So when you try to turn, the wheel on the inside of the turn has to cover a shorter distance than the wheel on the outside.
Right, like runners on a track.
Exactly. But since they're fixed together, one or both wheels have to kind of skid or drag sideways. This creates significant friction and makes steering a four-wheeled vehicle really difficult and inefficient.
And this is where the mine environment becomes relevant again, because the paths were straight.
Yeah. Exactly. The straight, purpose-built passages of the mine minimize the need for tight turns. This unique context made the wheel set's biggest disadvantage less of an issue.
So it was useful there, even if it wouldn't be great out in the open field yet.
Precisely. It allowed the wheel set to prove its value based on its incredible efficiency gains, even with that turning limitation. The environment sort of protected it in its early stages.
That's fascinating how the environment selected for this particular design at that stage.
Yeah.
Okay, so socketed rollers solved retrieval. The wheel set brought massive efficiency, but poor turning. What was the final proposed step towards the wheel system we recognize?
That's the third key innovation, the multi-body wheel and axle. This development came later, the sources suggest perhaps around 500 years after the initial wheel set.
Okay.
And this is the system we're most familiar with today, where the wheels are separate components that rotate independently on a stationary axle.
Ah, so the axle stays put and the wheels spin around it, like on a modern car, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. The primary advantage here is vastly improved maneuverability, especially when turning.
Makes sense.
Because each wheel can rotate at its own speed, they can handle the different distances during a turn smoothly without dragging or skidding. But the sources also point out another key benefit: increased robustness.
How does separating the wheel from the axle make it stronger? That seems counterintuitive, too.
Well, this is where the computational analysis really comes in handy.
Yeah.
In a monolithic wheel set, that single piece of wood, the junction where the thin axle meets the thicker wheel disc, is a point of high stress.
Okay.
Particularly from twisting forces, torsional loads, transmitted through the axle when it hits bumps or tries to turn.
Right, it wants to snap there.
Potentially, yes. In the multi-body system, with the wheel spinning freely on some kind of bearing surface around a fixed axle, those twisting loads at the wheel-axle connection are drastically reduced. The wheel just spins instead of transferring all that stress to the joint. This makes the whole system less prone to breaking under stress.
Okay, so we have this compelling proposed path, from simple problematic rollers to socketed rollers improving retrieval and allowing lubrication. Then the wheel set emerges, driven by that huge mechanical advantage, made viable initially by the straight paths of the mine. Finally, the multi-body system evolves later, improving turning and robustness. And you mentioned computational science validating this. How exactly did that work?
Yeah, this is where the physics and the computer-aided design become sort of forensic tools. Researchers used a computer algorithm. They essentially told it, okay, start with a solid prismatic roller shape.
Like a log.
Like a log, basically.
Mm.
Now, find shapes that incrementally improve performance specifically, minimize the pushing force needed to move a load, while maintaining enough structural strength not to break. The algorithm was allowed to make small variations to the shape and then test their efficiency using physics calculations.
It's like simulating thousands, millions of years of trial and error, but in a few hours on a computer.
In a sense, yes. It's an optimization algorithm guided by the laws of physics. And the remarkable outcome was that, starting from that solid roller, the algorithm naturally converged on the familiar wheel and axle shape.
Wow.
And it initially favored the wheelset design because of that early mechanical advantage boost.
So the physics alone, just the drive for energy efficiency and basic strength, pushes a simple roller towards becoming a wheel.
It provides powerful support for the theory, yeah. It suggests the wheel wasn't just some sudden, random invention, but could have evolved through a series of logical, efficiency-driven improvements. The simulation also independently confirmed the structural analysis, showing that the later multi-body system is indeed more robust than the wheelset.
Okay, so zooming out then, what are the biggest takeaways from this research about the wheel's origin? What should we remember?
Well, first, I think it offers a highly plausible physics-based narrative for how the wheel could have evolved. It wasn't magic. It was driven by the fundamental human goal of reducing effort, saving energy. Second, and maybe most importantly, it critically highlights the pivotal role of the environment. The unique controlled conditions inside the mine were like a selective pressure in nature. They made an early, imperfect form of the wheel set advantageous and useful at a time when its disadvantages, especially turning, would have made it impractical elsewhere.
It really challenges that classic image of a single genius inventor having a lightning bolt moment, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It supports a view of technological development as a more gradual evolutionary process. Key innovations building upon previous concepts step by step. The wheelset acted as this crucial technological bridge from the older roller idea towards the final multi-body system we know.
And the evolution didn't stop there, did it? You mentioned something earlier about modern bearings bringing it full circle.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating point from the sources. Look at modern radial ball bearings, invented in the late 19th century. What are they? They facilitate motion by using small enclosed cylinders or balls, conceptually very similar to rollers, but incredibly refined to minimize friction. It's almost like the technology circled back to the original core idea of rolling elements to achieve maximum efficiency in modern wheel systems. It's kind of ironic.
That's a brilliant connection. And this whole exploration, it's just a powerful reminder of how we can use modern science, these computational tools, to become detectives of the past, uncovering the secrets of ancient technologies from the sparse evidence left behind.
It really is. It's a fusion of disciplines: archaeology, physics, engineering, computer science.
What an incredible journey we've taken, really. From the mystery of the wheel's origin, the surprising challenges of simple rollers, the pivotal, almost counterintuitive role of the mine environment, through those proposed evolutionary steps, socketed rollers, the breakthrough of the wheel set driven by mechanical advantage, and then the later refinement into the multi-body system. And all validated, or at least supported, by computational science.
Yeah.
It just underscores so clearly how deeply linked innovation is to solving specific problems within specific contexts.
Thinking about that link between environment and invention, yeah, it gives you a whole new appreciation for how these foundational technologies we rely on actually came about. It wasn't simple.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the wheel's evolution was this complex, this gradual, and so tied to specific environmental pressures like those inside a mine, what fundamental technologies are shaping our world right now?
Good question.
What specific environments or problems are driving the innovations happening today? And how might their eventual origin story, when people look back thousands of years from now, be just as layered and complex and surprising as the wheels has turned out to be?
That's a great thought to end on.
Something to ponder as you move through your day, likely relying on countless hidden wheels you don't even think about.